All right. First of all, give yourself a round of applause for holding on and remaining in the room. Well done. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about what finance might look like in 2034, almost 10 years from now. And especially, I'm going to talk to you about how DeFi is maybe going to change how traditional finance operates today. So what is this DeFi topic? We've learned a lot about it over the last 2 days. But here's a definition. A new financial paradigm that leverages distributed ledger technologies or blockchains to offer services such as lending, investing, or exchanging crypto assets without relying on an intermediary that we know and that many of us work for. There's a very interesting book, if you haven't seen it yet, by Cam Harvey and co-authors. And what I really stole from this book is this little table that lists a bunch of interesting opportunities that DeFi offers to us, but also some idiosyncratic risks, some risks that maybe in traditional finance we're not so familiar with. So if you're interested in learning more about those risks, this book is a good reference. Unfortunately, because we are running out of time, I cannot go through all of them. So, why should we even care about what DeFi is all about? Some people say, well, total value locked is shooting through the roof. You know, there's a lot of crypto speculation. Is that really the reason why we should care about DeFi today? I argue no. There's an interesting article by Andreas Park and Katarina Malinova, and what they basically did, super interesting, they said, okay, what would happen if we would take some of the DeFi primitives and we would run the US stock market on top of it? And what they find is on the slide. There's billions and billions of dollars that actually could be saved by replacing some of the legacy technology with DeFi. Now that is a reason for all of us to pay a little bit of attention, I think. Let me talk a little bit about the research that I want to present to you today. So there's already a growing body of research from different disciplines, look into how these DeFi platforms work, how their governance actually is designed, what are the risks, what are the opportunities, and people from all sorts of different areas in academia look at it, right? Whether it's computer scientists, whether it's economists, whether it's people from organizational theory. But then I found this gap, and this is the topic of my presentation today, and that is to really understand a little bit more what the impact of DeFi would be on traditional finance, and also, if we work in traditional finance, what would be the skills and the competencies that we need to survive in a world where DeFi is perhaps a little bit more important than it is today. All right? So let's go straight into it. I created this questionnaire, and I put it in front of 109 experts. So we call this thing an expert elicitation. So it's a little bit different than a traditional survey. And once I created the questions, I also asked 2 specialists to review them to make sure that there's a little bit of quality control. Actually, I'll skip through this because I'm also looking at the time. But basically, the feedback that we got after sending out the survey was good enough to say, okay, this is relevant. All right? So we have 3 different groups that we included here. We have people who work in the DeFi industry. We have people who research DeFi from an academic standpoint. And then we have people that attended my class on decentralized finance. And something that's worth noting here is that most of the people who attended my class actually work for a regulator. So you would expect that they have very conservative views. Yeah? So really good mix. Here's a little word cloud to show who attended the class, and then you can see the word regulator pops out rather prominently. Okay. This is a distribution of countries that have participated, and yes, there's a very high bias on Singapore. You might say, oh, maybe it's not so relevant then for us, but don't forget that Singapore is also a bit of a fintech hub. We had Sobnendo talk earlier today about everything that he's achieved. So arguably, if we don't know how to do it in Singapore, maybe that's a whole different problem. So let me go straight into the first question. How would you assess the current or the future 2034 level of adoption within financial services of DeFi? That was the first question. And then the answer is, today, I should perhaps say, any charts that I'm showing you are basically showing percentages that are based on the respondents that answered the question with high or very high, okay? So today, the adoption level is pretty much zero, right? In traditional finance, we really don't use DeFi at all. But then, this is the interesting part. In 2034, 43% respond and say this DeFi adoption is going to be much higher. So what does that mean for us today? It basically means that if you haven't already started, it's probably the right time to investigate DeFi and understand it a little bit better. Next question. How do you envision the role of DeFi platforms in shaping the future of what we know as traditional finance? I don't know whether we can see the details, but I'll walk you through this thing. Sorry, I got too quick. So very small group of people say DeFi platforms don't matter. Few more say that there is probably quite an important role for DeFi, but it's going to be super regulated. Then we have another group, if my clicker works. Oh, I got too fast. Many folks believe that there's going to be some sort of collaboration between traditional financial institutions and also DeFi platforms. And then again, there's a smaller group that says DeFi is going to take over the world. Arguably, that's probably less likely. But if you take this all together, what we're saying here is that 70% of the participants really believe that DeFi will be at least causing some sort of disruption over the next 10 years. Let that sink in, 70%, more than 2/3. All right, next question. How would you rate the following possible scenarios? So what we did here is we put 5 scenarios in front of the participants to ask them what scenario is going to be most likely. All right? And here are the description of the scenarios. We go from 1 to 5. 1 is finance as usual, basically nothing changes. And then through a few iterations, we get to 5, finance for planet, people, and common good, where we basically have the crypto degen dream come true. And here are the results. So the most likely 2 are TradFi embraces DeFi, and then also highly regulated DeFi worlds. So you can see here that this collaboration idea reappears. And it's very important because whether we are in DeFi or in traditional finance, both of us probably should get ready to do something together rather than to say, oh, the other one is really bad. Also note that finance as usual doesn't really feature as a very prominent scenario. So if you assume that nothing's going to happen and this is a fad and it's going to go away, that seems like rather unlikely. So try to strategize for a scenario where DeFi is in the mix, okay? Maybe you have different views on how big a role it plays, but it's not going to be not there. All right. We then asked, what are the business areas or processes that will be most impacted by this DeFi topic? And here are the results. Risk management, obviously, and operations seem to be the areas that will be most impacted. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because I showed you a list of idiosyncratic risks before, and therefore most adoption or adaptation of current processes and systems are probably in the area of risk. What is least concern? HR. That's also interesting, right? Because some people say, well, if DeFi makes its way in, we're all going to lose our job. Doesn't seem like it. Okay, what else do we have? Sorry, I'm struggling with the clicker a little bit. Next question was around issues and potential problems, right? Where do we expect friction? And then, again, these are the results. And the greatest concern is clearly around security, and then followed by data management and privacy. And that's also not surprising, right? If you think about how current blockchains look like, they're very open. They don't have privacy protection features enabled yet. That seems like a reasonable concern. Some people that haven't looked at crypto as much as you all have still have this idea, oh, maybe blockchain is very bad for the environment. So here are 109 experts saying that impact on the environment is we can neglect that because it is so small. So if you haven't looked very deeply into all of these cryptographic primitives that allow for compliant but private finance, then I suggest you start looking into it. Sorry, I'm really struggling with this. Okay, next question is around custom. Let me just go back because I want to make sure I didn't. Yeah, okay. Next question is about customer service and the customer experience. So some people say, oh, blockchain is very clunky. Some people say, oh, banks are very clunky too. So what do our experts say here? Very small group says very minimal impact. A third of all the respondents say that there will be some minor impact on customer service. But then there's also another third that says DeFi is going to play quite an important role in customer service going forward. And of course, you have very small group that says, yeah, DeFi is really going to make a dent in the area of customer service. So if you were to synthesize what we're hearing here, basically, there's around half of the people that responded that say that DeFi is not a problem to customer service, but an opportunity. Yeah? So that's interesting, because if you Google customer service and blockchain, all you will find is a whole set of issues with wallets, they're difficult to manage, and so on and so forth. But then here, experts say there is a bit of an opportunity. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about competency. So we have a bit of a gist of how things might look like in 2034. What does that mean for us as individuals who work either in a fintech or in a fully licensed bank? So the question is really around competencies and how we, this is maybe not readable, but I'll walk you through. How we thought about it is that there are general capabilities to deal with DeFi would be one of them, but then you have two layers that you can go further into detail, right? And layer 2 talks about perhaps sector-specific competencies, so this would be understanding DeFi primitives and so on. Then you would have technological competencies, which are all around software development kits and the hardware and the validation and privacy and so on. But then you also have softer skills that are required, right? Cognitive skills, for example, or interactional skills. Even strategy might matter, right? Because at the senior level, an organization has to make a call. Are we going to engage with this? How much are we going to engage with this? And then eventually there's also ethical considerations, because not everything in DeFi you can call ethical today. So here, again, are the results. And the main takeaway is that all of these competencies are perceived to be more important in 2034 than they are today. Okay, so that's the first take home. The second one is that strategic competencies, so trying to make that strategic discussion about how you engage with DeFi, are rated even higher than understanding how DeFi primitives work themselves. I thought that was very surprising, because I thought, oh, maybe everyone's going to say, no, you need to understand how a zero knowledge proof works or something like that. But no, the strategy component is more important. So there are a few limitations to my study. I also have to be transparent as a researcher. And of course, surveys measure beliefs, not actions. So whether everything is going to come true that the 109 expert respondents say, we will see. I also disclosed as well, there's a bit of a Singapore bias in my respondents, but then again, there's also lots of good stuff happening in Singapore. And then there's also quantitative analysis that I could strengthen, and I think I'm working on that right now. What else could we do to understand this better, to help institutions get ready for the future? Well, perhaps we can build some theoretical models around how these competencies should be developed. We could also run the survey every year to see whether there are changes from one year over the next. And of course, you can also dive a lot deeper into the specific competencies to make a better call. I got 4 minutes and something. So I'm going to summarize what we just went through. First, nobody really believes that DeFi is important today. But remember on the slide, we also saw that 43.x% said that in 2034 is going to be either high or very high importance level. 70% of participants in the survey believe that there will be at least limited disruption of the financial services industry. So more than 2/3. Don't forget that number. If you look at the scenarios, TradFi embraces DeFi and regulated DeFi, which both imply that there's collaboration between DeFi protocols and our institutions of today, seem the most likely outcomes here. And if we look at where DeFi makes the most, causes the most trouble or creates the most work for us, then it's in risk management and operations. And if we think about the most important issues, if you remember, security and data management and privacy are ranked highest. And then last, don't forget that about half of the respondents suggest that DeFi is an opportunity customer service rather than a challenge. Okay. Let me see whether I can do this. When we talk about competencies, remember that all the competencies that we talked about matter more in 10 years' time than today. And so in my mind, and this is what I want to leave you with, perhaps the riskiest action that you can take is to do nothing. Right? If you do nothing, then that's probably really not very good. So hopefully you enjoyed, number one, the entire conference, 2 days of really interesting content. Hopefully you enjoyed a little bit my keynote as well. So now here's the task for you. There's going to be Istanbul Fintech Week next year. So you got about 12 months to absorb and reflect on everything that you heard, but also content of my keynote, and try to figure out what you're going to do with your DeFi strategy and how you're going to approach this topic. And before I leave you, 2 more things. One is, I got a book, so I got to really plug it, okay? So this is a book about how DAOs, the organizational form that DeFi usually uses, can interact with finance, or the other way around. So that might be of interest if you wanted to hear a little bit more than just 20 minutes about this topic. And then also, I just wanted to leave you with my details, because sometimes you hear the keynote and then you walk out and then you say, I wish I can ask the guy about X or Y. The best way to get hold of me is on LinkedIn. And if you wanted to ask any follow-up questions, then please get in touch. And with that, I get to close the event, I guess. Or maybe there's somebody after me. But thank you very much.